Story number one. I grew up in a two-story house at the edge of a small town. It was the kind of place that looked normal from the outside. Warm lights, neatly trimmed hedges, the faint smell of mom's jasmine candles. But if you spent a few nights there, you'd realize something wasn't quite right. It wasn't haunted in the movie sense. There were no screams at midnight or furniture flying around. It was subtle, the kind of wrong that hides in the quiet, in the corners where light doesn't reach. The master bedroom had a walk-in closet. That closet was different. The light inside it had a habit of turning on by itself, always that same soft yellow glow seeping out from the crack under the door. My parents brushed it off as wiring issues. But the thing is, it only ever happened when I was home alone. We had two dogs, Max and Ruby. Max was a big Labrador, gentle and lazy, and Ruby was a smaller mutt, loud and protective. Max would sometimes wander into the closet and just sit there, staring at nothing, tail wagging slightly like he was waiting for someone. Ruby, on the other hand, refused to go near it. She'd stand in the doorway, growl low, hackles up, like there was something inside she could see, but I couldn't. I didn't think much of it, until that one night when I was 15. My parents were out at a work party. I was upstairs playing a computer game with my headphones on. The glow from the monitor painted my room in pale blue. Everything felt ordinary. Then slowly, this feeling crept up, the kind that prickles your skin, like static building before a storm. I had this unshakable sense that someone was standing behind me. I spun around. There was something in the middle of my room, a shape, darker than the darkness around it. Human-sized, but not human. It wasn't solid, not exactly. It looked like a thick shadow, like smoke that had taken form. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't smell anything. But the air around me dropped 10 degrees in a second. It moved. Not towards the door, not away. It moved through me. Cold rushed through my chest like being dunked in freezing water. My stomach lurched and I couldn't breathe for a second. I don't even remember how I got out of the house. But the next thing I knew, I was sitting on the curb outside, shaking, staring at my lit-up window, waiting for my parents to come home. They didn't believe me, of course. Said I was overtired, or maybe it was a dream. My dad checked the closet light wiring the next day. Everything worked fine. I tried to forget about it, moved out eventually, went to college, started my own life. But weirdly, that house never stopped feeling like it was waiting for me. A few years later, I stopped by to do laundry, cheaper than the laundromat, and my mom always insisted I visit. The laundry room is in the basement, across from the furnace room. It's dim down there, with one bulb that hums faintly when it's on. As I was loading clothes into the dryer, I saw someone walk past the door, a solid figure. Just a flash of motion, a shoulder, an arm, moving from left to right, straight into the furnace room. I assumed it was my dad, but when I went upstairs later, both my parents were in the living room. Neither had been downstairs. That furnace room stayed dark after that. I could never bring myself to open the door again when I went down there. Even now, I swear I can see something shift in that dark gap under the door, like a shadow leaning just close enough to listen. But that wasn't even the last time. Last winter, I stayed at their house for a few days while they were visiting my aunt. It was supposed to be peaceful. The first night was fine. The second night, not so much. Around midnight, I went into the kitchen to get a drink. The house was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I remember noticing how still everything was, the kind of stillness where even the air feels heavy. Then from the corner of my eye, I saw movement near the sink. Something was crawling. It was pitch black, almost blending with the shadows under the counter. It didn't move like an animal. It was too fast, too jerky, like it didn't quite understand how to control its body. It crawled low, its limbs bending wrong, scraping against the tile as it dragged itself toward the center of the kitchen. And then it stopped at the drain. There was this faint wet sound, as if someone exhaled underwater, and it just seeped down, like smoke disappearing into a vent. I stood there frozen, staring at the empty spot. That's when the chandelier above the dining table started to swing. At first it was slow, a lazy motion back and forth. Then it picked up speed. The chain creaked, the glass pieces clinked together, and it started shaking violently, like something had grabbed it and was trying to rip it down. And just before I could run, it stopped. Instantly. No slowing down, no wobble, just still. The silence that followed was louder than the noise before. I barely slept after that. Every creak in the walls, every click of the house settling made me flinch. The next morning I told my parents about it. My dad just sighed and said old houses do weird things. Loose fixtures, drafts, shadows. He made it sound logical, reasonable. But the part that bothers me most is the closet. Even now, every time I visit, the light in that walk-in closet still turns on randomly. I've seen it flicker on while we're all sitting in the living room. Not a single person upstairs. I've tried convincing myself it's all explainable. Electrical issues, eye floaters, sleep deprivation, old wiring, or maybe stress. I've repeated those words enough times they've lost meaning. But every now and then, when I stay over, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and see that faint yellow line of light under the closet door. It's always on when the rest of the house is dark. And if I stand still enough, I swear I can hear movement on the other side of the door. Slow, deliberate, almost like someone invisible turning to face me. I've never opened that door at night, and I don't think I ever will. Story number 2, I've seen plenty of strange things as a journalist. People lying through their teeth, crime scenes that don't make sense, things that stick to your mind long after you've moved on. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for that night in that small, forgotten town. It was one of those off-grid places you find by accident, a dot on a paper map that most GPS systems give up on. My editor had sent me to cover a minor story, a missing postmaster, if I remember correctly, but the town itself felt like it had been missing from the rest of the world for years. Sparse houses, silent streets, and a kind of stillness that didn't feel natural. I was staying in a motel that looked like it hadn't seen fresh paint since the 80s. The manager barely spoke, just handed me the keys and pointed down the hall. Everything smelled faintly of damp wood and stale air. I remember thinking I'd be lucky if I didn't leave with mold growing in my lungs. It was around 8 in the evening when I decided to stretch my legs. The air outside was oddly warm but heavy, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm that never comes. The streetlights flickered weakly, some of them buzzing like dying flies. I walked without much purpose, my shoes crunching on the gravel, when I heard something that didn't belong. Music. Not just any music. It was old, crackly, muffled, like it was playing from a gramophone. A slow, haunting waltz drifting through the night air. The sound came from a house sitting alone at the end of a narrow lane. The place was pitch dark except for a faint glow coming from inside. I don't know why I felt drawn to it. Curiosity, maybe. Stupidity, definitely. As I walked closer, I noticed that the house was in terrible shape. Paint peeling off in sheets, weeds pushing through the cracks of the patio. The curtains hung stiff with dust. And yet the music grew louder, clearer, like it was playing just for me. Right when I reached the front steps, every light in the house flickered on at once. The sudden brightness felt wrong, like the place had woken up. Then the front door creaked, slow, deliberate, and unlocked itself. I should have walked away right there, but I didn't. I told myself I was investigating, that maybe someone needed help, but deep down, I think I already knew something wasn't right. Inside, the air was thick and sour. The music kept playing from somewhere deeper in the house. The living room was frozen in time. Dusty furniture, yellowed photographs, and a faint smell of rotten meat. My skin crawled, but I kept moving. That's when I saw them. In the dining room under a weak ceiling light sat a woman and 2 children. They were tied to their chairs with what looked like electrical wire. Wrists, ankles, everything bound tight. Their mouths were stuffed with chunks of raw meat. Their eyes were open, too open, wide and glassy, fixed on nothing. For a few seconds, I couldn't even breathe. My brain tried to process what I was seeing, to fit it into something logical. Maybe a wax display, maybe a prank. But the smell of decay killed that thought. The meat in their mouths was discolored, buzzing faintly with flies. The music stopped. The silence that followed felt alive. Then from somewhere upstairs, I heard a creak, a slow, dragging footstep, then another. Every muscle in my body wanted to run, but my legs felt nailed to the floor. I forced myself toward the staircase, more out of instinct than reason. The steps groaned under my weight as I climbed, heart hammering against my ribs. At the top was a narrow hallway lined with closed doors. The air was colder there, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. I stood still, straining my ears, but there was nothing. No movement, no breathing, just that heavy silence pressing against my eardrums. And then, from behind one of the doors, I heard something that made my stomach twist. A faint gasp, like someone trying not to make a sound. Before I could even reach the door, I heard it. A car engine outside sputtering to a stop. Then a door slammed shut. Someone or something had come back. Panic took over. I ran down the stairs, nearly slipping. The dining room was empty, completely empty. No chairs, no bodies, nothing. Just an old table covered with dust and an overturned glass. I swear on my life that table had been clean a minute ago. I stumbled out of the house, gasping for air, expecting to see headlights or movement outside. There was nothing. No car, no sound, just stillness. But the air felt wrong, thick, electric. It pressed down on me like a weight. My vision blurred and I realized I couldn't breathe properly. It felt like someone was squeezing the air out of my lungs. My chest burned and my limbs went heavy. I tried to scream but couldn't. Everything around me dimmed, colors draining until all I could see was black. When I came to, I was lying in my motel bed. My throat hurt and my clothes were damp with sweat. The clock read 3:12 a.m. I rushed downstairs to the front desk. The manager was there, staring at me like I was a problem he wished would disappear. I asked him what had happened, how I got back, if anyone had found me. He didn't answer right away. He just said I had never left my room, that I'd been inside all night, screaming and banging on the walls. I don't remember doing that. The other guests, if you could call them that, wouldn't look at me. One woman muttered something about hearing the same thing last year before her husband shushed her. I tried going back to that lane the next morning. The house wasn't there, just an empty lot overgrown with weeds. No sign of a structure ever being there. I left that town the same day. Didn't file my report, didn't tell my editor anything. I figured no one would believe me anyway. Sometimes when my phone freezes or the lights flicker in my apartment, I swear I hear that same old waltz playing faintly in the background. I keep telling myself it was just a hallucination, a mix of exhaustion, low blood sugar, and an overactive imagination. But every now and then, when I wake up gasping for breath in the middle of the night, I can still feel that air pressing down on me, thick and heavy, like that house never really let me go. Story number 3. When I was younger, my mom used to drop me off at my grandparents' house whenever she worked the night shift. They lived in a tiny town surrounded by dry fields, a place so quiet that even the air felt like it was waiting for something. The house itself was old, creaking under its own age, but it had a warmth to it, at least during the day. At night, though, that warmth vanished, and the place turned into something else entirely. It always started the same way. I'd be half asleep, the old wall clock ticking somewhere beyond the door, when suddenly my legs would drop. It wasn't a dream. I'd wake up at the exact moment they hit the mattress, bouncing like they'd been suspended midair and then released. Every time it felt as though someone had been holding me by the ankles above the bed, and the moment I regained consciousness, they let go. The first few times I brushed it off as a dream or muscle spasm, but it kept happening. The weirdest part was how it always felt the same, like falling from a short height, that half-second stomach lurch right before hitting the ground. My legs would ache afterward, as if they'd truly been lifted and dropped. My grandparents' guest room had 2 narrow windows. One faced the field, and the other faced a long hallway that led to the kitchen. I never opened the window toward the field because of the strange hum that sometimes came from outside at night. It wasn't crickets or wind. It was too low for that, like a faraway electrical hum, steady and pulsing. Sometimes it vibrated faintly through the bed frame. One night, when the leg dropping woke me again, I noticed something else. The air felt thick, heavy, as though I was underwater. My chest moved slower, my ears buzzed, and I could hear my heartbeat echoing through the mattress. The old wooden beams above me seemed closer, and the faint light from the hallway looked warped, stretching unnaturally like it was bleeding into the room. That hum from the field got louder, just for a moment, and then went completely silent. No crickets, no wind, just a vacuum of sound. And that's when the bed started to tilt. Not shake, not move, tilt. My head dipped lower than my feet, though the floor itself stayed flat. I could feel gravity pulling differently, like the whole room had shifted slightly off its axis. I tried to move, but my arms felt stuck, like they were pressed against something soft but resistant, the way your hand feels when pushing into a balloon. It stopped the moment I fully opened my eyes. Everything went back to normal. The bed was level again, the hum had returned, and my body felt free. But my legs throbbed like I'd been standing for hours. The next morning, I told my grandmother that I thought their bed might be broken. She laughed, said the old house was settling again. I wanted to believe her. But that night, I noticed something strange in the guest room. The sheet covering my legs was stretched tighter than the rest of the blanket, as if something had tugged it upward and let go. I tried staying awake after that, just to catch whatever was happening. Around 2 a.m., when the hum started again, I saw something subtle but wrong. The shadows from the window weren't static. They shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt. It wasn't light, it was movement. I blinked hard, thinking I was tired, but then I realized my toes were moving on their own. Small jerks, one by one, like they were reacting to invisible fingers tapping them. It wasn't painful, just precise. Every joint in my legs twitched in rhythm with that faraway hum. Then came the heaviness, the pressure, and the familiar drop. My legs bounced off the mattress, and the hum abruptly stopped. The worst night came a week before my mom switched to day shifts. I'd finally drifted off when I felt not just my legs, but my entire lower body rise slightly off the bed. Not much, just enough for the blanket to lift. It felt like being cradled by two invisible hands. My upper half stayed still, heavy against the pillow. I couldn't breathe properly. Then I heard it, a faint knocking sound, but not from the walls or floor. It came from inside the mattress, like someone tapping from within the springs. Slow, deliberate, and in threes. My chest tightened so hard I thought I'd pass out. When my body dropped again, the sound stopped. I sat up, gasping. The blanket fell flat, but there was one odd thing that made my heart freeze. The dust on the floor beneath the bed had shifted. You could see faint drag marks, two narrow lines leading from under the bed toward the fieldside window. The next morning, I went outside to check near that window. The ground below was soft dirt, usually undisturbed. But I found a perfectly shaped depression there, the kind you'd get if someone had stood in the same spot night after night. Years later, when I was older and staying at my grandparents' again, I decided to sleep in that same room for old times' sake. The house hadn't changed much. Still quiet, still humming faintly from the fields at night. I laughed it off as nostalgia. But around 2 a.m., something made me look toward the fieldside window. The curtain wasn't moving, yet the fabric seemed to pulse slightly, inward and outward, as if it were breathing. The hum was back, clearer than ever. And for the first time since childhood, I felt it again. That stomach drop feeling, that brief suspension of weight. Only this time, I wasn't asleep. My legs rose slightly off the bed before slamming back down. The sound echoed in the silence, unmistakably real. I didn't stay the rest of the night. I drove home with the headlights cutting through the empty fields, refusing to look in the rearview mirror because I kept thinking I might see something behind me. A few weeks later, my uncle called to say my grandparents had replaced the old guest bed. It had started trembling on its own, he said, even when no one was near it. They thought it was termites or old wood expanding. He joked that maybe it just got tired after all those years of supporting people. I laughed along, but something about that phrasing, tired, bothered me. Beds don't get tired. I've stayed in countless houses since then, and I've never felt that exact sensation again. But sometimes when I'm half asleep, I still get that phantom feeling, my legs suddenly dropping, like I've been lifted without knowing and set back down. And just for a split second afterward, I swear I can hear that same low hum. Not from the outside this time, but from beneath me, steady, patient, waiting. Story number 4. When my father got transferred to a small town for work, I thought that maybe it was a bit quieter than the loud city noises. I was in middle school, and something happened one morning that I still can't make sense of. It started like any other day. I walked into my classroom still half asleep, holding my bag like a zombie. My desk was directly across from the door, so if I looked up, I could see straight into the hallway. I remember sitting down, dropping my bag and glancing up, and that's when I saw it. Right in the middle of the doorway, hanging in the air, was a perfect black circle. Not a shadow, not a hole, just this void, about 2 or 3 feet wide, absolutely pitch black, as if someone had cut out a piece of reality. It didn't glow or shimmer or anything. It just was. My first thought was that it had to be some kind of projection or optical illusion, but it wasn't reflecting light. It was eating it. Then a kid walked past in the hallway, right in front of it, and I saw the circle clearly behind him. That's when I realized it wasn't on the wall, it was hanging in the air. And for those few seconds, I felt something like pressure in my ears, the way you feel when a plane takes off. Then just as suddenly the circle shrank, like it was collapsing inward and disappeared. I tried to forget about it, told myself it was just a trick of the light. But that night, when I closed my eyes, I saw that same circle behind my eyelids. It wasn't like a memory. It felt present, like it was watching me back. Over the next few days, strange things started happening in class. Small, almost ignorable things. Papers would slide a little on my desk, even when there was no fan on. My pencils rolled toward the doorway every single time. Once, the class fish tank, about 10 feet from me, made this quiet creaking noise, and the water inside rippled even though no one had touched it. I told myself it was air pressure, vibrations, anything logical. But there was something about the direction of it all. Everything seemed to respond to that same point in the doorway, like something was still there, invisible. One afternoon, I stayed late after class to finish a poster. Everyone had left. The janitor's cart was squeaking down the hall, and the classroom lights flickered a little the way old fluorescent tubes do. I looked up toward the door, just out of habit, and my stomach dropped. The circle was back. This time it wasn't floating in the doorway. It was closer, maybe 2 feet inside the classroom and slightly higher, near ceiling level. It was still perfectly black, perfectly round, but it wasn't still anymore. Inside the void, the blackness seemed to move, like liquid smoke swirling in slow motion. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The air felt heavy again. A low hum filled the room, more like vibration than sound, and my vision went slightly wavy at the edges, like heat distortion. My water bottle on the desk started vibrating. The noise built in my ears until I thought I'd go deaf. And then it stopped. The circle didn't fade this time. It moved, slowly, like something turning its head. The edge of it rotated, tilting toward me. There was no sound now, just silence, thick and wrong. And in that silence, I swear I could hear my own heartbeat echoing, not from my chest, but from inside that black void, like it was copying me. Then it was gone, just blinked out. After that, I didn't stay late anymore. But it didn't matter. The circle followed me in small ways. I'd see round shapes where they shouldn't be, on the corner of my vision, in reflections. Once, when I dropped a coin, it rolled in a perfect spiral before stopping flat, dead center of the floor, like it had been pulled by something. A week later, I came down with a fever and had to stay home. My mom left for work, so I was alone in the house. I fell asleep on the couch in the living room and woke up to that same heavy feeling, like the air was thicker than usual. The light coming through the curtains looked darker, muted somehow. I turned my head toward the hallway, and there it was again. The circle, not hanging this time. It was on the floor, perfectly round, blacker than black, swallowing the pattern of the tiles beneath it. It wasn't a shadow because it didn't stretch or fade. It was flat nothingness. The air above it shimmered faintly, like heat above asphalt. I could feel my chest tightening. The circle wasn't static this time either. Its edge pulsed outward slowly, as if it were breathing, and the sound, that low vibration, returned. My vision wavered, and I could see faint impressions on the walls, like handprints appearing for half a second and then vanishing. I tried to crawl backward off the couch, but as I did, I felt something brush against my ankle. Not a hand or a claw, but something like static. An invisible electrical touch that left a faint burn mark on my skin. The circle pulsed again, faster now, like it was reacting to me. Then everything went white. When I came to, I was on the floor. The light outside looked normal again. The circle was gone. My clock on the wall read 3:17. I told myself it was all a hallucination. But there was one thing I couldn't explain. A perfect ring, maybe an inch wide, burned into the wooden floor where the circle had been. Not scorched black, just lighter, as if the surface had been erased. I never saw the circle again after that day. Not directly anyway. But sometimes when I close my eyes too long, or when the lights flicker in a certain rhythm, I feel that same pressure in my ears, that same distortion in the air. It's been years now. I'm an adult. Rational, logical, all that. But there's something I still can't shake. The feeling that maybe it's not gone. Maybe it's just waiting for the next moment I look too long into a shadow, or stare too closely at an empty space. And sometimes, late at night, I'll catch myself turning toward a doorway, for no reason at all. And for just a heartbeat, I think I see it again. Perfectly centered, perfectly silent, a black circle holding its breath, watching me remember it. Story number 5. I hadn't been back to my hometown in over 15 years. It was one of those small, tucked away places that barely appeared on maps, surrounded by fields that looked endless when I was a kid. Every year, without fail, the town held its annual fair, the same one that used to be the highlight of my childhood. I thought it would be a nice idea to take my wife and 5-year-old son there this time. Maybe relive some memories, maybe make new ones. The fair looks smaller now, or maybe I'd just grown up. The same rusted Ferris wheel creaked at the edge of the field. The same carousel horses moved in a tired, uneven rhythm. There was even the same old cotton candy stall near the entrance. My son Tom was having the time of his life, laughing, pointing, jumping between games. He was fascinated by everything. It was going fine until we reached the center of the fairgrounds. Tom suddenly stopped walking, just froze mid-step. His small hand tightened around mine, and his gaze fixed somewhere ahead. I followed his eyes but saw nothing except a food stall selling popcorn and a few people passing by. He didn't say much, just whispered something about a clown. Apparently there was a clown standing a few meters ahead, smiling and waving at him. My wife and I looked hard, but there was no one there. No clown, no costume, nothing that remotely resembled what he was describing. Still, the way he pointed, his eyes wide and unblinking, didn't look like a kid making things up. We brushed it off, thinking maybe someone dressed up for the fair and left before we turned. Kids have active imaginations. Still, for a moment, I felt something, like being watched, just a flicker of unease. After a while, Tom got distracted by the games again, so we moved on. That's when we saw the haunted house. It looked the same as it had all those years ago. Black walls painted with skeletons and cheap cobwebs hanging off the entrance. I used to love that place as a kid, mostly because I knew where every fake ghost would pop out. I wanted to show it to Tom, thinking he'd enjoy it. And then the woman at the counter told us we were the only ones entering at that time. The inside was pitch dark. We stepped in and waited for the dim lightning effects to flicker on. When the faint bluish light finally buzzed to life, I could see just enough to make out the narrow corridor and some fake mannequins ahead. The floor creaked with each step, and the air smelled of dust and damp fabric. Halfway through, Tom suddenly said something again. He said the clown was walking in front of us. My wife and I froze. We looked ahead, but there was nothing. Just props, plastic skeletons and rubber bats hanging by wires. But Tom kept insisting, his little finger pointing straight down the hallway. I tried laughing it off, saying he was seeing shadows, but something about his expression, blank, serious, not scared, just certain, made me uneasy. Every time we crossed a prop, he whispered that it was real, that it was moving, that it was looking at him. The air got colder the deeper we went in. Not the kind of chill from air conditioning. This felt damp, heavy, like standing in a cave. Then suddenly all the lights went out, completely black. The faint electric buzz of the light fixtures stopped too, and even the sound of the fair outside seemed to fade. I called out to my wife, then to Tom. My voice echoed strangely, like the walls were closer than they were before. I reached out but touched nothing but air. For what felt like minutes, I just stood there, waiting for the lights to come back. When they finally flickered again, my stomach dropped. Tom was gone. It didn't make sense. There was only one path through the haunted house. I ran ahead, shouting his name. My wife was crying, panicking, her voice trembling in the darkness. We searched every corner, every prop, even behind the walls where I remembered storage space used to be. Nothing. I didn't hear him scream, didn't hear footsteps. He had just vanished. We ran out of the haunted house and went straight to the fair management. Someone called the police. I was shaking, trying to think logically. Maybe he'd run out somehow. Maybe he'd gotten lost in the crowd outside. About 15 minutes later, we saw him, standing right at the entrance of the haunted house, completely still. He was holding a small, torn teddy bear, one I had never seen before. It was dirty, its fur gray and patchy, like something that had been buried and dug up again. He wasn't crying, he wasn't talking, just staring ahead blankly, clutching that bear like it was part of him. The police checked the area, asked a few questions, but there wasn't much to find. Tom refused to speak about what happened inside. He just said the clown gave him the bear. That was it. We decided to leave immediately. The whole drive home was silent. Tom didn't say a single word. He just kept staring at the bear. When we got home, my wife went inside with him while I parked the car. That's when I heard her scream. I ran inside to see Tom on the floor, convulsing. His mouth was open and blood was pouring out, not from a cut or injury, but as if it was coming from inside. His throat made this wet, gurgling sound, and I swear for a split second, I saw fingernail-like marks deep inside when he coughed. We rushed him to the hospital. The doctor ran tests, checked scans, and came out pale-faced. He said the inside of Tom's throat and neck had been scraped, as if someone had clawed at them from the inside. Not an infection, not something he could explain easily. He kept asking if he'd swallowed something sharp. But here's the thing. When I emptied Tom's pockets later, I found tiny bits of thread. Red and blue, the kind you see on old stuffed toys. And when I picked up that teddy bear, it smelled faintly metallic, like rust or blood. That night, we couldn't sleep. Tom was sedated and my wife stayed with him in the hospital. I came home alone to grab some clothes. As I entered the house, I heard something faint, a soft squeak, like a rubber shoe turning. It was coming from the living room. The teddy bear was lying there on the sofa. I swear I had left it in the car. Its head was slightly turned, facing the hallway. When I bent to pick it up, I noticed something I hadn't before. The stitching around its mouth wasn't thread, it was hair. Black, short, human hair. And between its seams, near the arm, something small and sharp glinted. A nail, like a fingernail. I threw it into the bin outside. The next morning, when I came back to the hospital, Tom was awake. He was fine. Quiet, but fine. The doctor said his throat was healing unnaturally fast, which was odd but good news. When I lifted him up, I noticed something on his arm. 4 faint scratches, perfectly spaced, like someone had tried to grip him too tightly. We moved cities after that, never went back to that town again. I sometimes dream about that fair, about the haunted house, and that moment of blackness when Tom vanished. In the dream, I see what I couldn't before, the faint outline of someone standing at the end of the hallway. A tall figure with white gloves and a painted smile. Every few weeks, Tom wakes up crying, says the clown wants his bear back. The doctors say it's trauma. I say it's just nightmares. But sometimes late at night, I hear the faint sound of a squeaky shoe on our floorboards. And when I go check the living room, I smell that same metallic scent again. And I can never quite tell if I'm just remembering the fair or if something from there remembered us. Story number 6. I don't usually post online, but this thing, it's been eating at me. I keep replaying it in my head, like a tape that doesn't stop rewinding and screeching at the same point. I still don't know if what I saw was real or if exhaustion had me hallucinating, but either way, I can't unsee it. It happened last winter. My boyfriend and I were on a long road trip through the countryside. We'd been driving for over 10 hours, and it was already past midnight when we decided to stop. The highway was almost empty, and fog was starting to roll in, swallowing the road behind us. That's when we saw this small flickering signboard. Ravenwood B&B. The bulb kept blinking like it was struggling to stay alive. The place looked like an old Victorian library turned into an inn. Dark wood panels, ivy creeping up the walls, and big windows with yellow curtains that swayed even though the air was still. It had that eerie charm that feels nostalgic but wrong at the same time. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly like old paper and rose perfume. There were shelves filled with books that looked untouched for years. The receptionist sat behind a wooden desk, head down, face hidden behind thick hair. He didn't speak, didn't even glance up, just slid a key toward me. The key was attached to a heavy brass tag that said, Room 12. His hands looked dusty, like he'd been working with chalk or ash. I brushed it off. We were tired. My boyfriend was already walking down the hallway, half asleep. The hallway stretched unnaturally long, dim lights flickering every few steps. Our footsteps echoed like we were in a tunnel. Somewhere along the way, I noticed a door that stood out. It wasn't like the others. This one was metal with 4 or 5 locks stacked one over another. Each lock was of a different make. Some new, some so old they were rusted shut. I slowed down staring at it when I thought I heard something. It was faint at first, a muffled sound, then clearer, like someone thumping softly against the door, followed by shallow breathing. I froze. My boyfriend called from the end of the hall, asking if I was coming. I ignored the sound, convinced I was just hearing pipes or wind, and went to our room. I should have stopped there. That night I couldn't sleep. My boyfriend passed out immediately, but I kept replaying the noise in my head. The room had this uneasy silence, like the air itself was holding its breath. Around 2 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone for light and stepped out. The hallway was darker now. The bulbs that were dim before were completely dead. Only the emergency light from the far end faintly illuminated the corridor. My footsteps felt too loud. When I reached the metal door, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. It was unlocked. All 5 locks hung loosely, unlatched. The door was slightly open. The first thing that hit me when I pushed it open was the smell. It wasn't just rot. It was something wet and metallic, mixed with the sickly sweetness of decay. I turned on my flashlight and the beam landed on the far wall. That's when I saw them. Bodies, dozens of them. Human and animal, twisted and pinned to the wall with thick, rusted nails. Some were hanging upside down, some flattened against the surface like insects in a display case. Their skin looked waxy, stretched tight, almost polished. And then I noticed their eyes were open, all of them, glossy, glass-like eyes that reflected my flashlight back at me. Before I could move, I felt something wet pooling around my shoes. A thick, black liquid was seeping from the floor, oozing slowly like oil. The smell burned my throat. I wanted to turn around, but something tugged at my legs, sharp and sudden. It was like invisible hands clutching my ankles. I fell forward, my phone skidding across the floor, the light spinning wildly. For a split second, the flashlight illuminated their faces again, and this time, they were all smiling. Wide, stretched smiles that split their faces unnaturally. Their heads tilted toward me in perfect unison. One of the figures, a man with a twisted neck, had his mouth open, and I swear I saw movement inside it. Something small, like a finger twitching. I scrambled backward, grabbing my phone, and bolted. The tugging stopped, but the air grew thicker as I ran. Every step echoed twice, as if someone was right behind me, matching my pace. When I reached my room, I slammed the door shut, gasping for air. My boyfriend jolted awake, confused. I tried explaining, pointing toward the hallway. He looked skeptical but agreed to check with me, probably thinking I'd dreamed it. We walked back together. My heart was hammering so loud I could hear it in my ears. When we reached that spot, I froze. The door wasn't there. There was only a plain wall, seamless, unbroken. No metal, no locks, not even a frame. My boyfriend looked at me with this mix of concern and irritation. He ran his hand over the wall, then turned to me. Said I must have been sleepwalking or something. But here's the thing. I remember the scratches. When I fell, my hands had scraped against something sharp. The next morning, I woke up with deep, straight cuts on my palms. Not random, not messy, just 4 parallel lines like something had gripped me. My boyfriend brushed it off as me bumping into furniture. We left at dawn. I didn't even wait for breakfast. The receptionist was gone, the desk empty. The key I'd left there was still sitting where I dropped it, as if no one ever worked there. We didn't talk much during the drive. I kept staring at the road ahead, trying to convince myself that I'd imagined everything, that the exhaustion and flickering lights had played tricks on me. But when I checked my phone later, there was one photo in my gallery that I didn't remember taking. It was dark and grainy, but you could make out shapes, a wall, figures, dozens of them, faintly outlined, all looking toward the camera. And right at the center, there was a blur of something crouched, its face hidden, but the smile unmistakable. I deleted the photo immediately, or at least I tried to. But every few weeks it reappears, not in the gallery, not in my cloud backup, but as a screensaver, for a fraction of a second, when I unlock my phone in the dark. I told myself I'd never go back, never look up that town again. But sometimes when I can't sleep, I search for it anyway. And no matter what I type, Ravenwood B&B, Ravenwood Inn, Ravenwood anything, there's nothing, just a single result that keeps popping up. A scanned image from some old newspaper, the edges torn and yellowed. The headline reads, "Local library burned down, 1913, 5 found dead inside." And below that, a blurry black and white photo of the building. The same ivy-covered structure, the same windows. Only difference is, there's no signboard. And where our room should have been, there's a metal door with 5 heavy locks. Sometimes I think it was a dream. Other times when I wake up and see the faint imprint of those same 4 scratches on my palms, I'm not so sure. The last time it happened, my phone lit up in the dark again. The same photo flickered on the screen for half a second. This time, there was something new, a shadow standing right behind the crouched figure. Its hands stretched toward the camera, fingers long and thin, reaching closer, like it was almost touching the lens. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, every night around 2 a.m., I hear faint tapping from the wall beside my bed. 4 slow knocks, then silence. I tell myself it's the pipes. I tell myself it has to be. But deep down, I know what sound metal locks make when they start to come undone. Story number 7. I live in a small town in northern Michigan, one of those places where the loudest thing at night is the crickets. My house sits at the end of Willow Street, an old property that used to be a shoe repair shop decades ago. The basement, I was told, was where the cobbler worked. It still smells faintly like rubber and glue, even after all these years. It happened one evening last winter. I was alone at home. Power flickered a few times that night, but didn't go out completely. I remember standing at the top of the stairs to my basement, holding the old brass doorknob. I had gone down there earlier that day to fetch a screwdriver, so I knew it wasn't locked. As soon as I wrapped my fingers around the handle, I heard it. Someone running up the stairs from below, fast. Heavy footsteps, slapping against the wood, one after another, coming right toward me. I froze. The sound stopped just as abruptly as it started, right at the other side of the door. I couldn't tell if I'd actually opened it or not. The next thing I remember clearly is standing a few feet away from the door, heart pounding, listening. I was completely sure I was the only one in the house. For a few minutes, I convinced myself it must have been the pipes, or maybe something had fallen over. The mind plays tricks when you're alone in an old place, right? But from that night on, strange things began to happen. Each one small enough to shrug off until they started forming a pattern. The first thing was the smell. That sharp scent of glue and burnt rubber that had always stayed faint in the basement began drifting upstairs. It was strongest in the hallway near the basement door, even when it was closed. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to that chemical odor clinging to my sheets. Once it was so strong I went down to check for a leak, but the basement looked exactly the same. Tools hanging, cement floor, old shelves. Only that smell. Then came the sound. Some nights I'd hear faint scuffing, like someone dragging their shoes across the basement floor. It was rhythmic, almost deliberate, and it would stop the moment I got out of bed. One night I recorded it on my phone. When I played it back, I didn't hear footsteps. Instead, there was a low hum, almost like someone breathing through their nose right next to the microphone. I told myself it could have been interference. Old houses do that. Groan, settle, echo weirdly. But what bothered me most wasn't the sounds or the smell. It was the change in the temperature around that door. The rest of the house stayed warm, but that stretch of hallway leading to the basement felt like walking into a refrigerator. And then there were the things that moved. The shoes I left near the entryway sometimes turned toward the basement door by morning. Always both of them. Always aligned. Once, my flashlight was missing from the kitchen drawer. I found it a week later, lying halfway down the basement stairs. Beams still faintly glowing, even though I hadn't used it since that night I heard the running. I started noticing faint dusty marks on the wall beside the basement steps. Not handprints exactly, more like smudges dragged upward, as if something had brushed by while climbing fast. The marks kept changing position, like they were being wiped away and replaced. A part of me wanted to believe there was an animal down there, maybe a raccoon or a stray cat that got trapped somehow. But I set up a motion light and a camera. The next morning, the camera was on the floor, lens cracked, facing the opposite wall. The light still flickered on and off, though, as if it were detecting movement in an empty room. Then one morning, I found the basement door open. Not wide, just enough for a thin sliver of darkness to show. I knew I'd locked it the night before because I'd heard it rattle slightly in the wind. I pushed it shut again, but when I touched the knob, it felt warm. Not just from the sun or heating, more like the kind of warmth that comes from being held tightly. After that, I started noticing other oddities around the house. The old radio in the kitchen would sometimes switch to static by itself around 4 a.m., though it wasn't even plugged in. In the reflection of my TV, I once thought I saw someone walk past behind me. When I turned, no one was there, but the basement door was slightly ajar again. One night, I decided to end the paranoia. I told myself I'd go down there and check every inch. I put on my work boots, grabbed a flashlight, and opened the door. The air that came out was cold, heavier than usual. My breath fogged slightly as I stepped down. The sound of my boots echoed weirdly. It wasn't the hollow thud of normal steps. It was like the floor had a thin layer of something soft, damp maybe. Halfway down, the flashlight flickered, and I smelled that same burnt rubber scent, mixed now with something metallic, like rust or old blood. The bottom of the basement looked wrong. I don't know how else to describe it. The space seemed stretched, as if the far wall was farther away than before. The tools hanging on the pegboard looked like silhouettes rather than solid objects. My eyes kept adjusting, but the outlines wavered. Then I heard the running again. Not from below this time, but from above. Fast footsteps pounding across the floor of my house, circling, stopping right over me. Dust sprinkled down from the ceiling. The sound stopped at the top of the stairs, exactly where I'd been standing the first night. For a full minute, I couldn't move. I just stood there, flashlight trembling in my hand, listening to the silence pressing in. I climbed the steps as quietly as I could and locked the door behind me. That was 2 months ago. I've kept the basement sealed ever since. I even shoved a heavy cabinet in front of the door. But some nights when everything is still, I swear I hear faint tapping from beneath the floorboards. 3 slow knocks, always from the same spot. The house still smells like glue sometimes, even when I keep all the windows open. My cat, who usually sleeps on the couch, refuses to go near that part of the hallway now. She just stares at the door and growls in her throat, low and steady. Last week, I found something new. A small footprint on the inside of the basement door, clear in the dust, shaped like the sole of a work boot. The strange part was, it was pressed outward, like something had stepped from the other side and stopped before pushing through. I keep trying to find rational explanations. Maybe there's moisture warping the wood. Maybe old vents are creating echoes. Maybe I'm just tired and imagining patterns that aren't there. Still, there's one thing I can't reason away. Every few nights when I'm half asleep, I hear the creak of that basement step, the third one from the bottom. Always the same one. The sound is subtle, weight shifting, as if someone's standing there quietly, waiting for me to come back and open the door again. I tell myself I won't. But sometimes in the dark, I find my eyes drifting toward that hallway, almost expecting to see the door move on its own. And maybe it's just the old pipes, or the wood settling. But sometimes I swear I hear faint breathing just beneath the floorboards, keeping time with my own.